Hello, everyone. I hope you had a great first day at Amazon Business Reshape. We've had some incredible speakers, panelists, moderators on the stage in the last 24 hours. I was making some notes during Rebecca's session there. And I think what was interesting about that for me is we talked about risks and trends. And my takeaway as a business leader was it's our job to take action on what we can control, right? So the strategic importance of driving efficiency, controllership, corporate strategy becomes even more important in an environment where there's a lot of risk or a lot of uncertainty. And fortunately, we have a great panel here today to talk about that and talk about the role of procurement, how Amazon Business can help drive strategy, and each of these leaders I know has a lot to offer. For myself, while I've been at Amazon for more than 11 years, I've actually been with Amazon Business 8 days. So the great thing about that is getting here in Dallas, being able to hear directly from a number of you over breakfast, lunch, drinks, meetings, is such a great accelerant for me to understand how we can help serve your needs. So to all of you that I've met with so far, I appreciate your time, I appreciate your feedback, and look forward to getting more of that today. So each of our panelists here is a change agent within their organization. So whether it's influencing long-term strategies or being an active driver of innovation, the work of procurement is more visible and more impactful than ever. These leaders demonstrate there's no one right path to innovation. Alicia Allen is the Chief Accounting and Financial Operations Officer at Coupa. You might have seen Doug Gray here on the main stage yesterday announcing that Amazon Business is joining Coupa Advantage to bring even more value to our shared customers. Congratulations.
Thank you. We are over the moon about this and just love this partnership and what value we're going to bring together to all of our customers. It's amazing.
And I look forward to hearing more about that in a minute. Yeah. Lauren Bender is the Chief of Staff at Odyssey, a technology company that partners with state and government agencies to provide families with access to high-quality education. Thanks for joining us.
Excited to be here.
And Michael Morton is the Senior Vice President of Brand Management at Best Western, a global best-in-class hospitality enterprise. Thank you for joining us.
Be here. Thank you.
So, Alicia, I think let's start with you. I think we're going to get a good range of perspectives from the different organizations we have here today. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in. So to kick things off, I'd love to hear a bit more about your role and how the role of procurement has evolved within your organization. How do you use that to drive strategy? Where do you sit in terms of the organization and driving that?
Yeah, so good morning, everyone, again. So my role, I came into Coupa only 8 months ago. So Brenda and I decided I was a little more tenured.
She's the veteran.
In the role, right? So about 8 months into Coupa, and as a Chief Accounting and Financial Operations Officer, I'm really kind of the person pulling things together and in the back, making sure that everything in the business is connected, that we're collaborating, so that when we're interfacing with our customers, with all of the rest of our constituency, that it's a seamless experience. And what an amazing seat to sit in, because as a finance leader, procurement is like one of my key business partnerships, always has been. I have a manufacturing background as well, so I appreciate everything from manufacturing to technology across all industries. And if that partnership isn't there, you really have a big hole in your organization. And so what we see at Coupa, and what I can see, some of our research shows, is that 90% of business leaders are worried about meeting their top line. That's probably not shocking to anyone. I thought it would be a little bit more, actually, but that's a pretty staggering number. And so when the business is worried about top-line performance, you start to look at how do you shore up your business model and how do you address the bottom line. So who do we look to? We look to our procurement business partners to help solidify that business model and maybe take some cost out of the business. So we have to be connected. And in that connection, what you realize is if your procurement process has some hiccups, if it's not optimal, then you have a lot of inefficiency in your finance process as well. And you struggle to have that forecast to make sure you're going to meet your margins. I don't need to talk more. What a great lead-in this morning. I was going to mention some geopolitical and economic headwinds, but boy, I think we are well aware of that right now. And so those things, like we said, those are putting pressure on our margins as well. And so we look for cost-saving opportunities. We look to procurement to help make sure we've optimized the cost structure and that we're receiving the benefit, the ROI, from the supplier relationships that we expected.
Awesome, thank you. So Lauren, we talked a little bit yesterday about where your organization is in the growth and how you're driving strategy across a bunch of different states and systems. Can you talk a little bit about your perspective and how you're using procurement to drive that strategy?
Absolutely. So as Brenda mentioned before, we administer state government programs and provide families with funding that they might not otherwise have access to so that they can really receive an education of their choosing. And so Odyssey, we sit at the intersection of an ecosystem of a couple important stakeholders. That includes the families, that are end users, the parents. It also includes the state government, and it includes vendors. So for us, simplistically, we're moving funds from the state to the parent to the vendor, like an Amazon or like a driver's ed program in Idaho. But strategically, I think we've realized that we can create a lot of value for the other two parties and for ourselves if we reallocate purchasing power and we really lean into that procurement function. So what that looks like is really creating a best-in-class platform that has the most advanced guardrails so that the state feels comfortable around what purchases are eligible. And it also reallocates purchasing power to parents so that they're able to purchase in volume the goods of their choosing and really have a frictionless experience.
Super important. Michael, I was curious, when you and I spoke yesterday, I think you have a use case of an extremely distributed sort of global environment. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your role in that and then how you work across such a distributed network?
Yeah, sure, of course. Well, I think it's interesting when you talk about what I'm learning here in the last couple of days. We think we have a unique challenge, right? We're 4,200 hotels globally across over 100 countries. And we're different. There's two things you should know that are different about Best Western. One, we are a membership not-for-profit organization. So think about most every other hotel brand in the world, it's typically a publicly traded company, right? They're responsible to their shareholders. We are responsible to our owner-operators/members. So every fee we collect should be used to help them have success at their hotels. The second thing about it is that the vast majority of these individuals are owner-operators, right? So we heard some of the headwinds and some of the challenges, right? For us, we are seeing average rate increases steady. We're seeing demand in some segments decrease. This is globally. So what does that mean, right? So revenue opportunities are going to be limited, right? Insurance costs in our business are going through the roof. I'm sure many of you can appreciate that. The labor costs are just it's crazy. And so I support all of our members and support them operationally. And what they're telling me is our margins are eroding significantly. You've got to help us. And all those other factors we talked about, I can't really do that. But when I look at what our hotels are spending operationally, right, operating supplies and equipment, hundreds of millions of dollars of unmanaged spend, that's where we can help. That's why we think this is a great opportunity with Amazon Business.
And if you could just add on for me, if you would, how do you drive that across such a distributed? I mean, as you said, you have sort of local owner operators; they're making decisions.
Yeah.
You may see the big picture. How do you drive that strategy through such a distributed environment?
Yeah, this is almost embarrassing to say this, but in reality, if you ask me, I could give you a rough estimate of where our hotels are spending and through whom, but I couldn't pinpoint it and say, here's very specific data. We've got endorsed vendors across the globe, but there's no mandate that you have to buy any specific products or specific manufacturers. And we realized recently that, if our members value their uniqueness, they value that independence. But when it comes to finding a way to help them together, find opportunities to save money, now they're all in. And they voted, in North America, they voted to enact a standard and a requirement to use some very specific operating supplies and equipment. So for us, that was sort of the first step of, okay, now how do we identify those and prioritize based on the total volume of spend, and let's go out now and introduce it and roll it out to our members to help them take advantage of those opportunities.
Super interesting. I mean, because the next topic I wanted to get to is actually scaling. And then Laura, maybe if I'll start with you.
Sure.
I mean, I think, for all of us, scaling is a top priority, and we know bigger impacts comes with the bigger scale, right? And driving that accountability. Can you talk a little bit about how you build for scale and sort of build for that maximum impact?
Absolutely. So this is essential for our business. A lot of the programs that we run start kind of small, and then they have potential to grow massively over time. So we need to make sure that we're future-proofing the platform, because we can support, 20,000 families in year one, and that can go up 10x in year three. Looking to Texas, we're here. They're going to pass a program that could be $1 billion program just in year one, which is pretty incredible to think about that in 2025. So in terms of how we do that, it really comes down to tech innovation. And we've worked with our partners at Amazon to create a proprietary API. We were issued a line of credit. We've been able to increase our click rate, all to better allocate purchasing power to families. Spend is also cyclical on our platform. It ebbs and flows when programs open, when programs close, and at the start of the school year. And so we need to be able to make sure that we can meet the demand, and the only way we can really do that is through innovations in tech.
So I think this comes right to your sweet spot, Alicia. So can you talk a little? Yeah, exactly.
Scale's my favorite.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of the role of your company, the technology in driving that, and what you're hearing from customers?
Yeah, so let me start with picking up, something that you were talking about, Michael. Very often we're working with distributed organizations, right? Multinationals, several sites. So think about a healthcare organization that has clinics distributed across the region. Think about, manufacturing organizations with plants all over the world. So that adds this additional layer of complexity when you're trying to scale a business. So then put on top of that, what we often see as silos across teams, silos across business process, technology, and data, and you've got this confluence of things that are standing in your way from scale. And those things prevent comprehensive visibility to data and to spend, and then you have inefficiency in the organization, and guess what? Your margins are under a whole lot of pressure. That gap widens and widens if you fail to put process in place and think about how you scale the organization. So you have to find those silos, and it's being honest with yourself and the organization and say, we all have them. They're somewhere in the organization. And how do we drive a culture to break those down? And what we help a lot of our customers do, and what we're doing at Coupa as well, is we digitize, and that benefits all of your stakeholders. It gives you this common data, and guess what? All of a sudden, you're speaking the same language, and you're opening up communication channels that people didn't really realize were there before. So if you can embrace a move from whether it's distributed, whether it's silos, you've got manual process, a whole lot of manual process. If you embrace the change into integrated, automated, and a data-driven approach, you're going to definitely open up the floodgates to be able to scale. And as a procurement professional, solving those problems is accretive to the bottom line. And if you can articulate to the organization those real, very real, tangible financial benefits, that's going to increase the perception that you're a strategic business partner and ensure you have that seat at the table.
If I could add to that, I think you're spot on. The one thing that you have to know who your procurement partners are, right? So for us, and I'm sure many of you, we have hotel general managers or housekeepers who are our procurement people, right? So think about whatever you create as far as complexity, ease of use, repetition, reinforcement. That's the core of what we've got to figure out. Again, with 4,000 hotels around the world, and these people are checking people in. The general managers are working front desk. I mean, you all see it. It's the challenge that we have. So I think it's very, very important that what we're doing is designed at a level that sort of emphasizes understanding the complexity of who those individuals are and how to allow and enable them to utilize the platform easily so that it's mutual success for sure.
And Lauren, I'm curious about this sort of a voice of the customer as sort of an internal enthusiast. How do you get that voice? How do you make sure that you're developing tools, services, making the products available that your customers need?
Yeah, it's super important. I mean, jumping off of what Michael was saying, a lot of the families who are our end user and not necessarily our client, they're getting access to these resources for the first time.
Yep.
And so we are trying to reach folks who have never bought a computer before, and so are only able to do that through the use of government funds that we provide. But that experience should be the same for any family, and it shouldn't be with more friction because we have to put guardrails around it. So we do a lot of listening, we do a lot of learning, and we make sure that we try to meet the customer where they're at. So that means creating a platform that can be mobile first, that can be used in rural areas where there might not be access to Wi-Fi. We listen a lot to our states with regards to what we need to have on the platform in terms of inventory levels. And I think that goes back to, again, creating co-creating an API with Amazon where inventory is seen in real time and it's updated so that it's reflected with the latest and greatest and you're not getting purchasing delays.
Michael, I wanted to come back to your point for a moment because there's obviously making sure that we're serving the needs of those customers, we have the right products, we're driving efficiency, accountability. Although it's complicated, those things are table stakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
What about other organizational strategies like sustainability or ESG? How do you use your procurement strategy to drive those kinds of organizational strategies?
Yeah, that's a great question, particularly around sustainability, especially internationally. We were meeting this morning with some folks, and internationally, outside of U.S. primarily, they're so far ahead of us as far as sustainability initiatives. Our organization is changing now where many companies globally are saying, look, we're not going to consider bringing rooms to your hotels unless you can show us you have sustainability initiatives and GSTC, Global Sustainable Tourism Council, accredited certification for your hotels, right? Everywhere in the world, they get that. US, we're kind of pulling them along, but we're getting there. For us, it's now when we're making the choices of all this hundreds of millions of dollars of OS&E spend and products, that we have those options that are going to allow those hotels now and in the future the ability to opt in to have a choice that would meet the sustainability requirements. So it's constantly evolving. It'll happen more, I think, organically internationally. And we'll kind of have to force the issue a little bit more in the U.S.
Super interesting. Alicia, I'm kind of curious, so same thing, like how do you think about driving other kinds of organizational strategies through procurement?
Yeah, so just to leverage what we just talked about, in ESG, one of the really critical factors that we see that organizations need. In many ways, I would say, hey, ESG has become kind of not a standard operating practice, but a critical operating practice, right? It's not something we can ignore anymore, and I don't truly think most companies are. So we look to work with our customers and within our organization. First, let's connect all of the procurement functions, because that's where you can really drive a lot of change and get visibility from the data. Again, oftentimes we see disparate systems. We see the data collection process be something that's highly manual and difficult to navigate. If you can bring those things together, again, like I talked about, showing real financial value, you're showing real momentum there and moving faster with initiatives like ESG, DEI. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's an and, not an or. Lauren, let's maybe head for you next. We're talking a little bit about how to use procurement strategically, right, to drive the strategy across the whole organization. And that does mean that the functions are overlapping. Alicia's a great example, overlapping across, finance and into procurement, right? So it's no longer siloed in terms of the decisions we're making, how we drive that. How do you navigate sort of the increased collaboration burden in terms of cross-functional collaboration?
Sure. So for us, it's really become a cornerstone of our business, and we have to lean into the strategy competitively to win. We were vying for a contract with the state of Louisiana, and they asked, which vendors are on your platform, and specifically said, do you have a relationship with Amazon? And we need to be able to say yes, and then show that there's a strategic relationship behind it. So simplistically, it used to sit with supply chain fulfillment, but now is really bumped to the C-suite. And so I own a lot of the strategic relationships with our vendors. It's top of mind to the CEO, CFO, and it's really going to have a pivotal impact on how we run our business, because if we can bring forth these relationships and innovations from these relationships to specific states, that's how we're going to win contracts, and that's how we're going to grow.
So, Michael, you talked a little bit earlier about sort of you have some increased complexity with your kind of the way that your internal stakeholders are organized, and you talked a little bit about how they agreed or requested that there be a little bit more centralization. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about how that conversation went and how you landed where you did?
Sure. 78-year-old organization, and that's how we've purchased for decades, right? Again, hundreds of millions of dollars. And the other great thing about a membership, a Best Western membership, is you have a vote. So you have a hotel, you get a vote. And when we enact requirements across our brand, the members vote on it. So I liken my job in many ways to working in government, because you come up with an idea, you sort of shape it, you go back, you get feedback, you modify it, and then you bring it forward to the members to support it. And we said, look, we know these 10 critical OS&E, operating supply and equipment items, make up a huge, 75 to 80% of that OS&E spend. We are going to ask you to vote a mandate on yourself to require these items, right? And partnered with our Amazon business partners, pulled all that information together. But basically, before they even voted, Brenda, they didn't know the pricing. They just knew there was an opportunity there. They understand the power of Amazon. They understood what we're trying to do to help them. And I think 86% voted in favor of this. So it's not simple as a lot of organizations. You say, this makes sense, right? Go do it. Here, we have to get their buy-in, and we have their buy-in. The key now is implementation, and make it sticky, make it easier to consider easier, because they won't do it unless they see the value of doing it.
So I'm hearing you came with the data, the proposal, and then it's incumbent upon your team to provide the ease of use for them to actually.
Our team, just
Our team.
Yeah. I just want to make sure you know. Yeah, it's our team.
So that's a great sort of success case study. I think, it's a challenging field. There's always more for us to do kind of collectively. But I'd love to hear a couple more success stories. So should we start at the end, Alicia? Do you have a particular success story that you're proud? I know you're relatively new in this, but are there particular success stories that you're proud of, and sort of how did you get there?
Well, this week is a success story because of the big
Could be the press
announcement that
release
we
from
had.
yesterday. That's a great success story.
That's a great success story because you know what? It's not just about Coupa and our partnership. We are offering something amazing to all of our customers, right? The value add that's there. So I love to win big, and it's winning big when it's more than just about Coupa. We have a couple other kind of customer success stories. One is, a large, I'll say, automotive manufacturer that they took down the silos, they opened lines of communication, and they got rid of all of their manual processes around their POs. Have another different end of the spectrum, a healthcare nonprofit that was able to take about $18 million of cost out on an annual basis. So think about being able to reinvest $18 million in life-saving research. Just incredible. And so when people connect the dots, that's the kind of wins that you see. It's real tangible stuff.
That's a great example. Any particular success stories that you're proud of, you and your team?
Sure. I'm thinking back from when we started integrating Amazon on our platform, and it was an ask from the state of Missouri. Families really want to see Amazon. They really want technological resources, but we have a lot of rules and regulations around what we can provide. And they had some funky rules. I mean, we could not have monitors on our marketplace that were over 27 inches. Families could only buy one technology purchase. And so, we had to do a lot of co-creation there with the team to make sure that all of the parameters were in place and that there was no fraud on the back end so that people were not purchasing things that were ineligible. So it took a lot of time, it took a lot of effort and energy, but I think when we launched, it was really a resounding success. And I think the team did upwards of $5 million across the platform just in that one state in a couple months. And on the parent side, folks have been incredibly happy with what they've been able to purchase for really the first time. These were all low-income families, so I would say it was a huge success.
Great, thank you. All right, I have a question now that might be a little self-indulgent as I learn more about the folks in this room. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on emerging technologies and how they're impacting the operations. So, we heard a lot from Doug yesterday, how AI and the data-driven strategies are driving procurement, but a lot of the impactful benefits are not a magic wand, but they're actually real-world tactical changes that we're making, right? How technology is driving that. So I'm interested in the technology applications that are less sci-fi, but more real-world, and how you guys are using those to drive your organization's strategy. Michael, I'll start with you.
I would start, I was reading somewhere that, everybody's like AI, right? It's the buzzword, ML, right? Machine learning, and how do you make this work, and what's it going to mean for the future and employees, and just everything we all struggle with. And for me, I think what's really compelling is that we're trying to figure out a way to utilize the machine learning piece. I'm not so sure how AI fits for us at this point. We're a hospitality group. And that personal touch and having AI respond to a guest complaint. It's
hospitality.
Kind of,
it's all about the personal touch.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But the machine learning part, and this is what we're excited, I think, as we get into our partnership, right? Again, now we can start to understand not only what our hotels are buying, why they're buying it, when they're buying it, inventory, shelf life, waste. Now we'll be able to start to learn, and my goal ultimately with our team is to figure out a way to, as much as possible, take advantage of that machine learning, and so it almost becomes an automated process, right? That's where we see this going to. Again, frees up our hotel staff to focus on our employees and our customers, and it ensures that they're not just going in and clicking a checkbox because that's what they order every week or every 2 weeks, and now you're, just sitting on tons of inventory. So to me, for us, that's a huge opportunity here. We'll get the spend, we'll figure out the spend, but how we manage it and make it easier and let our hoteliers be more effective is really key for us in the ML part of technology.
That resonates a lot. I know, again, as I'm getting more familiar with the problems we're solving at Amazon Business, understanding sort of predictive replenishment and how we make sure that we're getting those products to you reliably at the right cost at the right time, super valuable. Lauren, is there any good examples you have on sort of uses of technology that aren't sort of pie in the sky, but today's solutions?
I think it's honestly a lot of what Michael said as well, that we have so much more that we can do with automation. The programs that we focus on right now, they're not necessarily new, but the reason that they're exploding is because states are now open to using tech, and they're open to using automation, and governments have become, more keen to seeing what's actually out there and not hiring, 50-person staffs to try to whitelist what people might be able to purchase. And so I think now that there is an appetite, there's a lot that we can do to innovate. We see on the back end, we essentially are a marketplace facilitator. If we can automate and if we can leverage the same guardrails, but make sure that it's seamless and it's happening automatically, and so you don't have to create that friction between getting approval from a state, we would be able to just scale massively and power purchasing for really any family in a given state, which I think would be pretty incredible. So yeah, there's a lot to do, and I think we're looking at a lot of different things with AI and ML. Unfortunately, we are subject to regulatory approvals for a lot of what we do, but I think that there's room to grow.
And so was the unlock the receptivity from the states, or was there is there a technology that you were like, no, we should apply this now? What was that turning point for you?
Yeah, I think it's become ubiquitous, right? Everyone knows now what Gen AI is. It's not something that's scary. People are experimenting with it in their free time. They're using ChatGPT, they're using DALL-E, right? Just to have fun. And so I think with that, you have a higher appetite from folks who might have otherwise been super reticent.
So Alicia, I'm interested to ask you the same question, but I feel like Coupa you're right at the intersection of making technology, making it easier, more accountable, more trackable. But I'm kind of curious how do you think about that?
Yeah, so I just before I jump there, I'm thinking as we're having this AI revolution conversation, which we've had probably in every session, right? It was only in the last couple of years that our organization, not Coupa, but this probably resonates with a lot of you in this room. You're like, AI, that sounds a little scary. It takes some is it taking some control out of our hands? We need policies. We really need to address it. And I thought about it and I said, you realize our ERP already has AI built in. You realize we're using OCR. You realize that what we now put under this big umbrella really has been part of our daily operations for quite some time. So we think about, how does that then intersect with a strategic, bringing strategy together between procurement and finance. Lots of companies are transitioning from traditional approaches. Even if you had technology that you didn't realize, you're transitioning into something that should be more of a strategic operating model driven by AI. And it's a transformative shift. I think we're all embracing it. I don't sense the fear anymore. I was asked a couple weeks ago, like, how do you feel about it? I'm like, give me everything. There are problem-solving technologies that are just amazing. What you do have to be careful about, though, is thinking about how your AI is generated. So here's the word of caution. As you think about AI, you have to think about what's the source of the data. And so one of the things, amazing foresight, I had nothing to do with it because it was 15 years ago, but at Coupa, someone said, let's start to collect spend data for our customers. It's anonymized. So all of our customers, most of them along the way, if you don't agree, we don't use your data, but we anonymize the data, and that's built a $6 trillion database, if you will, that our AI is built on. It's across all industries. It's been built over 15 years. So the quality of that data is unmatched. And so when you think about what's it built on, ask that question across to make sure you aren't using AI that's going to hallucinate because it picked up some, anomaly in a data set. So if you can really harness great data sets and great AI, it's going to help your organization execute on strategy much, much faster.
Alicia, you used transformative. And I think for us, and I'm talking hospitality, and again, I'm sure it relates to many of your businesses, it's just become the norm, the way things have always been done. Somebody negotiates a contract on your behalf for 3 to 5 years, there's incremental annual price increases, and you buy, and then that person who's done the negotiation, and usually brand, we're done, right? You go out and buy it. And we've gone to vendors and said, we want you to work with us, we'll give you more of our business.
Yeah.
And their response is, no, thanks, we've got enough, right?
Just to be clear, I'm not saying that.
But that's what we're dealing with. And that's the transformation that when we are able to do this, and I'm not talking Best Western, I'm talking for our hospitality environment, this changes everything. You get rid of the organizations that are taking 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 or 10% of that business, putting it in their pocket. To me, it's always, can I buy directly from the manufacturer? And if not, how close to that can I get? Yep. And that's the kind of sort of laziness that we've encountered, and we've created that. And I think this is really with that information, being able to pull that information, make decisions based on real strong data. We're going to be able to go back to those intermediaries and say, this isn't going to work anymore. Yeah. And who will benefit? At the end, it's going to be our hotel members, right? Yep. Yeah.
And you made the point earlier, and that has to be easy enough to use, yep, right, for it to get adopted. Sure. So we've just got a couple minutes left. I was hoping maybe we could close on a bit of a rapid fire. So it's clear, like, each of us as leaders have the ability to drive some level of change, right, and use procurement to drive that. What I would love is a bit of a look into 2025 from you all, hopefully more optimistic than the last session, Rebecca. So if you could fill in the blank for me. Being an agent of change in 2025 will take blank. Michael, can we start with you?
Sure. Communication, collaboration, reinforcement, right? We've got to communicate the program we're building to the members. We've got to collaborate, teach them how and why to use it. And then we've got to reinforce to make sure that it doesn't get stale and fall from use. If we can do that, we will enact great change across our organization.
Awesome. Lauren?
I'm going to say empathy. I think that we have a fast evolving and interconnected world, and if you want to play across all of it, you need empathy.
Yeah.
Love that. Want to close us out here, Alicia?
Yeah. Innovation mindset. be willing to do things differently. Don't be too stuck in what you've done. Realize you might have a little too much pride, and be willing to make changes to transform. And if you're going to transform, do it with innovation. Don't do it for the sake of saying, hey, we're doing a transformation project. Do it from the heart and with an open mind, and willing to be like the leader in something.
I love that. So some really good advice to leave us with. That's the time we have this morning. We could have gone probably for, as we did yesterday, for another half an hour or hour. So Alicia, Lauren, Michael, thank you guys so much for sharing insights, perspectives. Thanks to everyone here who made time to not just come to this session, but to come to Reshape. So, and as we've heard, hopefully you guys have taken a bit of inspiration. I love that last question, and sort of the mixture of technology and empathy and innovation mindset that we all can take into 2025. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.